Well, they thought they'd done everything right. They thought they'd set themselves up for the rest of their lives. Now a desperate group of pensioners has less than a week to leave their homes.
But I can't take it.
I know, it's not fair.
She's helped it a lot.
What's happening to Australia?
There was a deal, an unspoken pact that formed the bedrock of the Australian dream. You work hard for 40, maybe 50 years. You play by the rules, pay your taxes, pay off your house, and in return, you get your golden years. A time to finally put your feet up, play with the grandkids, maybe do that trip around the country you always talked about. It was the reward, the finish line, the light at the end of a long tunnel of hard yakka. But what happens when you cross that finish line and find out the prize has been stolen? What happens when the dream you were sold turns into a waking nightmare? For hundreds of thousands of Australian seniors, that nightmare is now their reality, and the silence around it is deafening. Today, we're exposing the silent crisis that is destroying the lives of the generation that built this country. We're not talking about a few people doing it tough. We're talking about a systemic failure, a generation betrayed, a system where 1 in 4 men are still working at 70 years old, a system where 2/3 of renting retirees are living in poverty, a system where the family home has gone from being a castle to a prison, a system where the pension covers only 76% of living costs, leaving seniors $13,000 short every single year. This isn't about politics. This is about a promise that has been fundamentally broken, and it's time to get angry. If you've had a gutful of seeing our seniors betrayed, if you believe that a lifetime of hard work should be rewarded with dignity, not poverty, then you need to join us. We're building a resistance against the spin and the lies. We're the channel that tells the raw, unfiltered truth that the mainstream media won't touch. To help us drag these mongrels into the light, join us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Every member helps us fight for the Australia we were promised.
A 74-year-old pensioner who was struggling to pay his power bill.
Forget the brochure with the smiling grey nomads on the beach. The new face of retirement is a 70-year-old stacking shelves at Woolies or answering phones in a call centre. 20 years ago, only 1 in 10 Aussie blokes was still working at age 70. Today, it's 1 in 4. And for men in their late 70s, 1 in 10 are still on the tools. This isn't a choice. This is a necessity. The retirement age for men has been pushed to 67, up by more than 2 years in just a decade. But the reality is, for many, there is no retirement age anymore. It's work until you drop. As one economist from KPMG put it, pulling out a laptop in your 70s is much easier compared to laying bricks at that age. People who have spent their lives in physically demanding jobs are being forced to find any work they can, just to keep their heads above water. We're even seeing 5% of workers over 65 holding down multiple jobs. Let that sink in. Multiple jobs in your 70s. This is the unretirement generation, a generation that did everything right only to find the goalposts shifted at the last minute. They're not working for a bit of extra pocket money to spoil the grandkids. They're working to pay the electricity bill. They're working to afford their medication. They're working to survive. But what about super? Wasn't that supposed to be our saviour? The magic pudding that would fund our golden years? What a joke. The Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, or ASFA, says that to have a comfortable retirement, a single person needs a lump sum of $595,000. A couple needs $690,000. Now, let's look at reality. The median super balance for someone aged 65 to 69 is just $200,000. That's not a gap. That's a gaping chasm. It's a $395,000 lie. Millions of Australians are hitting retirement age with less than a third of what the so-called experts say they need. And why? Because for decades, the system was stacked against them. Years of low wage growth, interrupted work patterns, especially for women raising families, and the rise of the insecure gig economy meant that building a massive super balance was an impossible dream for the average worker. So what do they have to fall back on? The age pension. A measly $29,000 a year for singles, or $44,000 for couples. Meanwhile, ASFA says a couple needs over $73,000 a year for a comfortable life. You don't need to be a maths genius to see the problem here. There's a $30,000 black hole in the budget of every retired couple relying on the pension. A report from Australian Seniors found that for the average pensioner, their pension only covers 76% of their monthly expenses. 68% of that pension goes straight to the essentials: housing, utilities, groceries. They are starting every single month in the red. And 69% of pensioners don't believe the aged pension is enough to cover their living costs. They're right. It's not. The system was designed to fail, and 86% of pensioners anticipate they'll depend on the pension even more in the years to come as their savings dwindle and costs keep rising. 74% are terrified that inflation and rising interest rates will erode what little quality of life they have left. So what's the solution we always hear? Just downsize. Sell the big family home, buy a shoebox apartment, and live off the difference. It's the catch cry of every property spruiker and out-of-touch politician. But it's a myth, a cruel fantasy. The data shows that only 19% of empty nesters have actually downsized. Nearly 70% are staying put. And it's not because they're selfishly hoarding space. It's because they are trapped. For many, the family home isn't an asset they can just cash in. It's their last line of defense. They're asset rich, but cash poor. They can't afford the stamp duty, the legal fees, the real estate agent commissions to move. And where would they go? Into a rental market that is its own special kind of hell. They've seen the stories. They know what's out there. Skyrocketing rents, dodgy landlords, and the constant insecurity of knowing you could be evicted at any moment. So they stay. Forcing them to sell the one piece of security they have left is not a solution, it's an eviction notice. The home they poured their life's work into, the place they raised their kids, has become a prison. They can't afford to stay, and they can't afford to leave. They are prisoners of the property market, rattling around in oversized homes, unable to afford the heating in winter, while the government tells them they're the problem. This crisis has cleaved our nation in two. It has created a brutal, two-tiered retirement system. On one side, you have the 66% of recent retirees who own their home outright. They're not all living in luxury, but they have a roof over their heads. They have a level of security. On the other side, you have the renters. And for them, retirement is a catastrophe. A report from the Grattan Institute is one of the most damning things you will ever read. 2/3 of retirees who rent from a private landlord are living in poverty. More than half of them have a total net worth of less than $25,000. That's not a retirement fund, that's a used car. Compare that to homeowners, where only 6% have a net worth that low. This is the real story of Australia in 2025, a story of two nations. If you own a home, you have a chance. If you don't, you are condemned to a life of poverty and insecurity. And the problem is getting worse. Home ownership rates among the poorest 40% of 45 to 54-year-olds have collapsed from 68% in 1981 to just 54% in 2021. That's a 14-point drop. We are marching towards a future where the majority of retirees will be renters, and therefore the majority will be living in poverty. This isn't an accident. This is a policy choice, a choice to reward property investors and abandon everyone else. The human cost is devastating. The Australian Seniors Report found that nearly 60% of seniors are struggling to pay for essentials, 79% are cutting back on everyday expenses, 60% have stopped dining out, 46% have cut back on social activities, 41% are cutting back on heating and cooling, 1 in 5 are delaying or forgoing necessary medical treatment because of the cost. People are choosing between medication and a hot meal. 52% say financial stress has affected their social lives. 34% avoid social gatherings because they can't afford them. 26% lack the motivation to socialise because of the emotional toll of financial worries. 43% report that financial worries are having a moderate to severe impact on their emotional health. This isn't just about money. It's about dignity, connection and mental health. As Carolyn McColl from Meals on Wheels said, the aged pension is no longer sufficient to meet basic living expenses, with rising costs forcing many elderly Australians to make significant sacrifices. Since the onset of COVID-19, nearly every aspect of daily life has seen substantial price increases, leaving little to no room for essentials such as medical care or social engagement. Some are unable to afford heating during winter, while others rely on Meals on Wheels for affordable, balanced meals. Urgent action is needed to ensure older Australians are treated with the respect and care they deserve, rather than being left behind. The great Australian dream of a comfortable retirement is dead. It has been replaced by a nightmare of poverty, insecurity and betrayal. A generation that built this country has been abandoned by it. They were promised a reward for a lifetime of hard work. Instead, they got a name badge and a return ticket to the workforce. They were promised dignity. Instead, they got a choice between heating and eating. This is not the Australia we were promised. This is not the nation we should be. If you've had a gutful of this betrayal, if you believe our seniors deserve better, then you know what to do. The link to our Patreon is below. Let's fight for the generation that fought for us. Let's demand that the promise be honoured. To see the latest Australian crisis, click this video here.